Hi, my name is Nick Lewis, and today I'm going to be discussing the principles of distance throwing. Now there are two main categories of distance throwing: horizontal throwing and vertical throwing. So first we are going to be discussing distance throwing from a horizontal perspective. So the first thing to discuss is the stance. Now it's important to start with your feet together in the classical martial artist's attention stance, just like this. And then you want to unzipper your feet and put your left foot forward, if you're right-handed, in front of you, about 6 inches. Now, unlike the stance, as in the principles of accuracy, you want to turn your body right. So your stance looks like this. And then you want your feet to be firmly rooted in the ground, and this is the stance for distance throwing. The next important thing is to discuss the position of the hips. Now you want your hips to be turned, so much so that the right side of your chest is aligned with your right knee. Now that your left arm is in this position, it's important to discuss what to do with the right arm. Now the most important thing is that it's at this angle where the elbow is aligned with your right foot and your shoulder. Your shoulder must be completely relaxed. Now that all else is in place, we're going to be discussing the position of the wrist. It's important for your wrist to be aligned with about the top of your head, and it must be turned back at a 90-degree angle. Now that all is in place, we're going to be discussing the release. Now in the release, you want to relax your shoulder. I cannot emphasize that point enough. Relax your shoulder and snap your hips as fast as they can go. And once you're about here, you want this arm to quickly thrust downwards, because this will give you the extra speed necessary for propelling the card at great distances. So from here, you're going to snap your hips, thrust your arm down until your chest is completely straight and facing the direction that you want to throw. And then you want to extend your arm out, and at the last possible second, snap your wrist and then release the card. So quickly, it will look like this. Now I should mention one important point. You may have noticed that I've only been discussing the Thurston grip in these past couple of videos, and that's because I'm most familiar with the Thurston grip. But please realize, however, that the same principles can be applied to the two other main grips as well. Now we're going to be discussing distance throwing in terms of the vertical. We're going to be using the same stance that we used when we were discussing distance throwing in terms of the horizontal, except this time the stance should be slightly wider. Now what you want to do is you want to turn your hips. So again, your right chest is aligned with your right knee, and then you want to put all of your weight on your right foot, just like this. And this will give you the necessary energy to spring up, just like that. So when you're springing up, just like this, you want your finger to point in whatever direction you're going to be throwing the card in. So if you're throwing it up in the sky, you would point it at the sky, or in my case, at the ceiling. And then, once you're here, you're going to do the same thing that we discussed in the principles of distance throwing in terms of the horizontal, and you're going to thrust this hand downwards, which is going to give you the necessary power for the shot in order for the card to travel high. Now another important thing to discuss is when you're pointing here, the ultimate goal is you want your card to replace the position that this hand was once in. So where this finger is, you want the card ultimately to replace it while thrusting this arm downward. And then you can release the card. So now I'm going to demonstrate height throwing. And as you can see, I so perfectly hit the ceiling, a total distance of 14 inches. Now we're going to go outside, and I'm going to be demonstrating some real distance throwing. The following clips will also serve to demonstrate why you should never buy cards from 5 below. You will recall that in the first video, I mentioned that the cards should be air cushioned. Well, like I said, don't buy cards from 5 below. These cards will ultimately take about 40 to 50 feet off of my shot. Join me for my next video, when we will be discussing the principles of power and speed.